is Thug the new N-word? So Seattle Hawks cornerback Richard Sherman made some news from his post-game interview with Fox Sports after he taunted his rival Michael Crabtree with a nice little handshake after his interception during the Seahawks 49ers game. Now, during the interview, Sherman had said, "I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're going to get. Don't you ever talk about me. Don't you open your mouth about the best, or I'm going to shut it for you real quick." Yeah. Now, of course, Sherman got a little bit of heat after that, especially, I imagine, from some 49ers fans. A lot of these responses being reportedly racially charged. Now, I've got some examples of some of the things that he had received, some of the sample of the tweets that he got on Twitter that say, well, don't mess with Richard Sherman. He will go bananas. Guy's a freaking jungle monkey, quote. And another one, quote, Richard Sherman is an ignorant ape, unquote. Now, some of these get even worse, but I'll continue. Someone put Richard Sherman in an animal hospital because he's a fucking gorilla. Hashtag, no racism intended. Oh, no racism intended. Because no African American has ever been compared to a monkey. Seriously. But that's okay, guys. That's not racially intended. But it sort of gets to kind of sort of racist undertone to holy shit fucking blatant racism. And I'm going to be reading some of these tweets verbatim, and just got to warning you guys, there's very, very, very strong language in this. Like I said, reading it verbatim. One tweet was, quote, Richard Sherman equals typical nigger douchebag. Yeah. Another tweet, quote, fuck you, Richard Sherman, you high-paid nigger, unquote. And this was incredibly disturbing. Quote, Richard Sherman deserves to get shot in the fucking head. Disrespectful nigger, end quote. But it's this one that I think is actually the worst out of the bunch. Not because of its language, but its connotation. Quote, someone needs to introduce Richard Sherman to George Zimmerman. Hashtag thug life over. Quote. Those were some incredibly, incredibly terrible, hateful, racist tweets. But look, whether or not you disagree, or you agree or disagree what Richard Sherman was doing, he was, unsportsmanlike contact or whatever, I don't care, right? Football players kind of taunt each other all the time. It's sort of the nature of the game. You're in direct competition. So I don't have a problem with that. But the problem I do have is with those kinds of blatantly racist tweets like that. Now, you can tell by some of those tweets who the racists are and the terrible people actually are. But however, there is another word that actually bothered Sherman much, much more than the blatant racism. And that's, of course, the use of the word thug. Now, in a news conference this week, Sherman actually told reporters, quote, the reason that it bothers me, the word thug, is because it seems like it's an accepted way of calling someone the N-word now. It's like everybody else said the N-word, and then they say thug, and that's fine. It kind of takes me aback, and it's kind of disappointing because they know. Now, there's a recent article by Deadspin from a writer named Kyle Wagner. He actually counted how many times the word thug was used on television on that Monday. They found that it was used about 625 times. Quote, the word thug has been used so many times by the same sort of people about the same sort of thing that it's no longer even accurate to call it code, he writes. It's really more of shorthand. It means a black guy who makes white folks a little more uncomfortable than they prefer. Now, do you guys agree with Sherman? Do you think that that thug, a lot of the people that are using the word thug in this context are being racist? Is it the new N-word?
Let me break my tradition and jump in first. I know I like to jump in with the last word so I look smarter than everybody. But full credit where credit is due. I'm drawing heavily here from John Mulaney, stand-up comedian and writer. Is thug the new N-word? Unequivocally, absolutely not. The reason we know that is because we're saying the word thug. We won't say what the N-word is. If you're comparing the badness of two words and you won't say one of those words, that's the worst word. Now, that said, are there clear and explicit racial overtones to people calling him a thug? Absolutely. It's if not racism, it's racialism at best. I full disclosure, to come clean and air my dirty laundry. You guys are Facebook friends with me. You can confirm this. I jumped on the anti-Sherman bandwagon, but I'm not a racist because I did it before his interview, and I didn't use the word thug. I actually missed the interview because I was in a Facebook discussion with how classless the victory was because of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty he got for messing with Michael Crabtree. And I was just like, you put this guy out of the Super Bowl. Like, he knows that. That should be victory enough for you. There's no need to get up and ruin it. So, but whenever somebody comes in after a game and is screaming and excited or whatever, I thought he looked kind of silly. And I don't particularly care for him. But to me, the most detrimental behavior he did was the penalty, not the interview. But yeah, I mean, when you call somebody a thug like that, it's totally like Sherman says himself, borderline code. It's almost just flat out, racial language now. But that doesn't mean it's the N-word. There's a history of acts committed, associated with that word that set it apart from other racial slurs, And so if you want to have a discussion about whether or not there's racial, underpinnings to that word, there absolutely is. I think you're crazy to say there's not. At least the way it's used now. I told somebody at lunch today, a colleague of mine, that we were doing this story, and he's a little bit older than us, and he was just like, well, no, of course, like he couldn't comprehend it because he grew up in an all-white neighborhood, or predominantly white neighborhood, and where he grew up, they used the word thug all the time, and it meant bully. So clearly, it was like this was not a racial word for him because there were no black folks around where he lived to, be calling that. It was what they called bullies. And I think it's fair, if you're going to say thug equals bully, I think he was kind of a bully there towards the end of the game. But again, that's a small caveat. The way this word is being used, the discussion we're having, it's clearly a racially charged word, and it's a way to get away with being racist in public.
Yeah, well, according to dictionary.com, the definition of a thug is a cruel or vicious ruffian, robber, or murderer. I don't think he really kind of fits that either.
Are you kidding? He robbed Crabtree of that pass. Just ask him.
I'm gonna agree with Richard Sherman to a point. Like, some people in the media probably using the word thug as a code word or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna say it's the new N-word by far. But to me, growing up, a thug probably did mean closer to a bully. It's somebody who settles their problems with violence. And I grew up in a time where I had deans and teachers calling me, or not me a lot, but my friends and I, like, a group of thugs. So, like, it really means, like, just somebody who settles their problems with violence or, like, does, like, things that are physical. And, like, I actually don't agree with people's, like, fake outrage over Richard Sherman. Like, the guy, they interview him right after the game. Like, he got the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, but that was literally right after Crabtree shoved him in the face.
Crabtree shoved him in the face because of what he did to get the sportsmanlike penalty, the unsportsmanlike penalty call. The action that got him the call was before the shove.
Well, according to him, what happened was he went up to Crabtree and he was gonna say, like, good game, because they battle and they talk trash about each other the entire game. He was gonna say good game because he got the last play and it was over. And Crabtree just, like, got in his face. I mean, I've seen the tape. I did see Crabtree get angry. Like, I don't know when the flag was thrown, like, exactly. I'll admit that. But back to the original point. It's like people going, like, crazy after his interview. Like, first of all, he's in Seattle. The crowd is going insane because they're going to the Super Bowl. He's super pumped because he got the deflection that led to the interception with the cornerback or safety that nobody seems to know their name, who actually got the interception.
Right.
And he's yelling, but he's excited. So he's, like, talking loudly incredibly loud building to a reporter about a guy who did something to just piss him off, and that was Crabtree. And like, I get that people are calling him a thug because they thought he didn't make any sense or like he was too loud or whatever. And the reason I kind of lean away from it being like super racial is because the guy he deflected the pass from, Michael Crabtree, was black. The guy who threw the pass, Colin Kaepernick, was black. Like, none of them are thugs, even though Crabtree has been called that in the past. Like, it's not really a racial thing. It's based more on like the way he spoke and the way he was perceived.
And but to push back a little bit, like, again, now bully doesn't necessarily entail violence. You know, there's lots of bullying, you know, without actual violence. But so in defense of the word thug and getting to use it still, but also in defense of oh my gosh, I just blanked, of Sherman. Like, he didn't do anything violent. You know, he was a jerk, I think. But hey, in the heat of the moment, it's a kind of a big deal. I don't know that I would have been any better. However, like, there's a time, you know, there's a comparable situation here, where somebody was a thug, and you know, this cat right here, for the Lions, how you pronounce his name? Ndamukong Suh. Yeah, here he is, you know, stomping a player on the ground after a play. This cat's a thug. Like, that's thuggish behavior, and I want to, you know, I think I want to hang on to the word, like, for people like this who actually deserve it. And so, like, yeah, so I think whenever people tell Sherman he's a thug, like, he didn't do anything thuggish. To me, it is racial. But at the same time, like, there's a time and a place when somebody's actually being a thug, and I don't know, maybe we need to preserve the integrity of the word so we can call people out when they deserve it.
And the thing is, I'm not saying that Richard Sherman, like, they were right to characterize him as a thug. I'm just saying that thug isn't necessarily a 100% racial term. Like, I don't think
I'll concede that totally.
But
it depends on, you know, it really depends on the context and really who's kind of using it.
Yeah.
But in some
in this context,
bad context,
it's undeniably racial. We're talking about Sherman. It's racial.
Yeah, and this isn't the only time that it's been used in a racial context either. I mean, you had, if you can remember back to the Trayvon Martin case, and how many times the word thug was getting thrown around to describe, you know, Martin, who was a black man and wore a hoodie and that kind of thing. Of course, Geraldo Rivera blaming him for wearing quote unquote thug wear. And just recently, a more recent case is the Omaha police video of that title, you know, the little African American toddler, the thug cycle.
Yeah.
It just seems like in a lot of places that it seems to be used with more of a racial connotation than than I think it originally has been used. But then again, when you look up the etymology of the word thug, and this, you know, comes from a quick search that you could do, it actually comes from the Hindu word thag, or thief, Sanskrit scoundrel, to conceal. It was basically a thug was used to describe someone who was in a secret network of fraternities, right? That sort of a cult that robbed and killed British colonists down in India. So to the British, it was a racial thing. Somebody who's a thug was a brown-skinned Indian person that you don't know, but could be out there trying to harm you. So in a way, that the original connotation of the word thug was indeed racial.
Well, look, I think I'm going to throw my 2 cents in, is that it is completely kind of contextual in the way that you use the word. I mean, here in the I mean, you know, just from my own personal experiences, and, you know, from where I've heard it been used in the media and social media, what have you, thug isn't a racial term at all. I mean, unless it's has a particular motivation in the context. I mean, thug traditionally in the UK is used towards, I don't know, mainly kind of, I don't want to say white supremacists, but out here in the UK we have a political group called the EDL, the English Defence League, you know, who want to get rid of all immigrants, think that kind of Islam's a kind of a devil religion, and all, like they're a bunch of racists. But the media,
it's your Tea Party,
in a way, but they're probably more racist and more stupid and ignorant, if that's possible, believe me. And but their leader, well, their ex-leader, he's now formed his own splinter group, a guy called Tony Robinson. that's not his real name. He created a fake name and everything. But that's beside the point. Like him and his kind of cohorts, they were described in the media as being thugs because they used to have kind of hold a whole ton of rallies, and kind of if there was an Islam rally going on, they'd hold a counter rally, and they were the ones who'd start the violence, and they would be the ones who'd be kind of described in the media as being the thugs. So over here, at least in the last couple of years, it's traditionally been white people who have been kind of described as thugs. So again, it is completely context sensitive. And in the case of Richard Sherman, I think that in this particular case, the people who are using it, I mean, Jeff reading out the tweets before, they're blatantly racist people who are using that term in that context, but the word itself isn't racist, whereas nigger is in any context a racist word. So yeah, I agree. Thug is not the new N-word.
I agree with you that they shouldn't have called them that. I just don't agree that it's the N-word or it's the equivalent of the N-word, because in almost like in certain other contexts, it will be white people calling their political enemies thugs because who are also white, like union members tend to be, or white supremacists or federal agents or whatever. It's just a way to like demonize somebody quickly, and it doesn't always have to be racist, but it can be.
I think that Sherman was right in this context. In the context that he's referring to, I definitely think that it was more of an accepted way for people to call him the N-word. But that doesn't mean that in every context it is incredibly racial, because it matters. I've said this before. Context matters. And in this context, definitely racial, definitely a second-handed way of saying the N-word.
One more thing. When you're playing Peyton Manning, who's obviously going to be the quote-unquote hero, like, you need to find some kind of villain. So a lot of this is the media overblowing it, because you have the good boy, Peyton Manning, and he needs to play a
he's
villain.
Playing, like you've got Sherman playing the heel, essentially.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you used that term, because did he not look like a professional wrestler after that game to anybody else? Like, that's all. I was like, this is the WWE.
Right. So like they're gonna like a lot of the outrage is just to like gin up Sherman versus, because Russell Westbrook isn't a dominant quarterback, so you got to gin up Peyton Manning versus somebody on their team, like the most recognizable.
Russell Westbrook also may be the nicest person on the planet.
Right.